Story 1. The Ghost Guest Part 1. Arrival. My name is Lucas, I'm 28 years old, and I work as a night receptionist at a small hotel in the countryside of Sao Paulo. The establishment has only 3 floors and about 40 rooms. During the week, we rarely have more than 15 rooms occupied. My shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's a quiet job most of the time. I sit behind the counter, do paperwork, sometimes check the security cameras, and when it's too quiet, I watch videos on my cell phone. The lobby isn't large, just the reception desk, a few sofas, and a TV in one corner, with vending machines on the other side. Behind the counter is a small office with a glass window where I can see the lobby while I work. At night, the front doors lock automatically, so guests have to ring the doorbell for me to press the button and let them in. Normally, nothing happens after midnight, except for the occasional late guest. But one night, a man came in around 11 p.m., and everything about that situation still makes me sick when I think about it. Part 2. The man without a registration, he rang the doorbell and I let him in. He looked about 45, tall, somewhat thin, wearing jeans and a baseball cap and carrying a backpack. He approached the counter and asked if we had a room available for the night. I said yes, gave him the price, and he nodded and pulled out a card. I swiped the card. The system beeped as if approved, and I handed him a key card for room 214 on the second floor. I remember he stared at me for a few seconds longer than usual before leaving. He had a blank expression, and his eyes remained fixed on me for maybe 3 or 4 seconds after I handed him the key. Then he turned and headed toward the elevator. Nothing screamed dangerous immediately, but it was enough for me to notice him. After that, I sat back in my chair and fiddled with my phone for a while. Around midnight, I looked up and he was back in the lobby. He didn't come to the counter. He just walked past me and sat in the lounge area with the sofas. The TV wasn't on, but he simply sat facing it. I thought maybe he couldn't sleep. Some guests hang out in the lobby sometimes, so I didn't think much of it. But after half an hour, I realized he was literally just sitting there doing nothing. He wasn't on his phone or reading. He wasn't even dozing. He was just staring at the blank screen. Part 3. The discovery. I got up for a moment to get water from the vending machine, and as I walked through the lobby, I felt him turn his head and watch me the whole time. I didn't look directly at him, but I could feel his eyes on me until I got back behind the counter. It gave me a very uneasy feeling. Around 1 a.m., I was checking the reservation system on the computer because I was bored, and that's when I noticed something strange. I opened the list of occupied rooms and saw that room. 214 said vacant. I muttered what the hell to myself and double-checked because I had literally checked this guy, and an hour earlier I thought maybe I had made a mistake. So I looked at the check-in records and there was nothing about him. No name, no charge, nothing. So I went to the transaction screen to make sure his card had been swiped before, and it showed no payment. I remember feeling incredibly confused because I swore I swiped his card and it beeped as if it had worked, but there was nothing in the system. That's when I picked up the phone and called room 214. It rang about 10 times, but no one answered. So I checked the key card's entry log, which tells me if the door to that room was open that night, and it showed nothing. No one had entered the room. That's when I realized he never even came to the room after I gave him the key. Part 4. The disturbing behavior. He looked into the lounge, and there he was, still sitting there, staring at the TV that wasn't even on. I started to get a horrible feeling in my chest. I sat there debating what to do. Part of me thought maybe the system had just glitched, but the fact that the room wasn't checked in and had no charge made it pretty clear he wasn't even registered. I waited another 15 minutes just watching him. Around 1:30 a.m., I walked over and asked if everything was okay. He turned his head and looked at me blankly, telling me he just couldn't sleep. Then he turned back to the TV. I waved and went back behind my desk, but my hands were shaking. Around 2 a.m., I noticed he wasn't sitting in the lounge anymore. My stomach immediately dropped because I hadn't seen him in the lobby. I scanned the area and then saw him standing at the end of the hallway near the restrooms, half hidden in the darkness. He was just standing there, motionless. I kept looking at him, pretending to be on the computer. He stood there for a while and then slowly came back and sat in the lounge again as if nothing had happened. Part 5. The cameras. He called my manager at home and explained what was happening. She sounded tired and told me to just keep an eye on him and call the police if he did anything threatening. I remember hanging up and thinking that it already sounded threatening, but I didn't know what else to do. I checked the security cameras after that. I saw him on the camera in the first floor hallway. He walked to the end of the hallway, stopped at the end, stood there for several minutes, then walked back. Later, he went into the stairwell and stayed inside for about 10 minutes. I don't know what he was doing in there. Every time I looked up from my computer, he was somewhere else, near the vending machines or near the elevators. Once, he just stood near the corner of the lobby where the light wasn't quite right. He was always staring. Around 3:30 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore, so I called the police non-emergency line and explained that there was a man at the hotel who I didn't think was a guest. They said they'd send someone. Part 6. The approach. While I waited, I noticed him move again, this time closer to the counter. He was standing maybe 5 feet away, just watching me. He didn't blink much, and he definitely wasn't speaking. He just stared blankly as if he had a staring problem. I pretended to type something on the computer, but I was so scared I could barely breathe. Around 3:50 a.m., the doorbell rang and I thought maybe it was the cops already, but it was just another guest returning late. I let him in quickly and the man turned his head and watched the guest pass. I noticed his eyes following him all the way through the lobby. This scared me even more because it was as if he was studying him. A few minutes later, the man disappeared again. I checked the cameras and saw him standing outside one of the guest room doors on the first floor. Like he was literally just standing there. That's when I actually called 911. I told them he was outside a guest's room and that I didn't know what he was trying to do. They said officers were on their way. Part 7. The intervention. He kept my eyes glued to the camera and he just stood there in the doorway for about 3 minutes, then slowly walked back into the lobby. When he returned, he came straight to the counter this time and leaned over it. He looked at me and asked if there was any food. His voice was so low it was disturbing. I told him there were vending machines in the corner. He gave a small smile and then walked away. I just sat there staring at my watch, begging for the officers to come. Finally, around 4:10, 2 officers appeared. I let them in and pointed directly at him. He was back in the lounge, sitting. They walked over and talked to him for a few minutes. They asked for his ID and asked questions I couldn't hear. Then they let him out. One of the officers came back and explained that the guy wasn't a guest at all. The credit card he gave me was stolen, and he had no luggage or reservation. He was just pretending to gain access to the building. They accused him of trespassing and the stolen card. After they left, I sat there trembling until my shift ended. Every time I looked at the cameras, I expected to see him again. Part 8. The realization. The part that disturbed me the most was realizing he'd been inside the hotel for hours, wandering around and standing outside guest rooms, watching me from different angles. And he was never supposed to be there. I have no idea what his plan was, but I know it wasn't good. That was the scariest night of my life. Now, whenever I work nights, I triple-check the system. I make sure every person who comes in actually has a reservation, and I'll never trust a card machine beep again without checking the confirmation screen. Because that night I learned that sometimes people don't need to break down doors to get in. Sometimes they just smile, hand over a stolen card, and hope you don't notice until it's too late. Story 2. The gas station observer part. 1. The first encounter. My name is Marina. I'm 24 years old, and I work the night shift at a small gas station on Rodovia dos Bandeirantes. It's the kind of place most people don't even notice unless they're out of gas or completely lost. I took the job because it was quiet and predictable. I liked it, or at least I used to. It all started on a Thursday night. Around 1 a.m., the air outside was humid and still, and the buzzing of the fluorescent lights had been making me irritable all shift long. I was about to microwave a cheese bread roll when the doorbell rang. A man walked in his early 40s, maybe older. He had a green coat, messy hair, and dry lips as if he hadn't smiled in years. He didn't go straight for the coffee or snacks like most people. He just stood near the counter, eyeing me with a strange kind of familiarity. "Hi," I said, forcing a polite smile. The man then said, "You always work so late like this." Part 2, his knowledge. I blinked and said, Yeah, most of the time." He smiled. Then he said, "I figured. I've been here a few times. I noticed it's always you." This made me more uncomfortable than I let on. "Oh yeah, small town," I said. He didn't leave. "Marina, right?" I froze. I wasn't wearing a name tag. I was about to ask how he knew, but he kept saying I have beautiful handwriting. And he pointed to the whiteboard where I'd written, "Cinnamon coffee is back." Most people dot the I's. You use small dashes. It's very specific, thoughtful. I didn't answer. He didn't buy anything. He just stood there for another minute, watching me as if studying my reactions. Then he finally nodded. "I'm Paulo," he said. "Just curious, that's all." And then he went out into the fog. Part 3. The frequent visits after that, he started showing up randomly. Not every night. Not enough to scream stalker out loud, but often enough for me to stop assuming it was a coincidence. Sometimes he would come inside. Sometimes he would just sit in his car near the edge of the parking lot with his headlights off. One night I tried to ignore him. He came in, bought a bottle of water, and lingered as usual. "You're quieter tonight," he said. "Long shift," I murmured. He slowly looked around the store as if taking inventory of everything. "It must get lonely. Just you here in the dark, nobody else for miles," he said. "I'm fine," I replied. He leaned on the counter. "Are you ever afraid of being a woman alone at night?" His voice wasn't threatening. That's what made it worse. It was curious, kind of neutral, like he was asking about the weather. I took a step back and asked, "Do you need anything else?" He tilted his head. "You always keep the back room door locked." "Smart. I noticed you check it around 2 a.m. almost every night." Part 4. The Polaroid. My stomach churned. I didn't answer. "I'll let you get back to work," he said with a soft, almost apologetic smile. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." Then he left again. After that night, I started walking to my car with the keys between my fingers. I kept a crowbar under the counter. I changed the curtains in my apartment, started showering with the bathroom door locked even when no one else was home. There were nights when he didn't come. Sometimes I went a whole week without seeing him, but that didn't help. In fact, it made it worse because I never knew when he would reappear. Like the time I came back from a 10-minute break and found a Polaroid on the counter. It was me refilling the windshield washer fluid behind the gas station. It was taken that night, up close. Too close. There was no note attached, but the dotted I's and the word cleaner on the can label had been circled in red ink. Part 5. The confrontation. The next time he came in, I told him to leave. I told him that if he stayed, I'd call the police. Paulo just nodded. "I understand." I was very direct. "You're the kind of person who's used to being misunderstood. I thought maybe you'd appreciate someone who pays attention," he said. "That's not paying attention. That's obsession," I replied. He didn't flinch. "Would it be easier if I smiled and brought you a soda every night? Would I be more normal if I just talked about soccer and pretended not to notice that your shoes are always half a size too big? Or how your left eyelid twitches when you're tired?" By this point, I was already dialing 911. He didn't stop me. The police arrived quickly and he didn't resist. He just stood there, arms at his sides, waiting. They searched his car and found a notebook full of dates and times. It was my schedule, notes on my walk, my clothes, my purchases. One page had only my name written repeatedly in ever-tightening circles until it became scribbles. He kept telling the officers the same thing. "I just notice things. I'm just a curious guy." Part 6. The afterwards. The restraining order was approved that week. Now I no longer work nights. I don't even live in the same city anymore. The company transferred me to another location 2 hours away. But even now, when I drive home and see headlights behind me for too long, I feel it tingling in the back of my neck. And sometimes I still think about the way he said my name, as if he already knew how it would sound coming from his mouth, as if he were practicing. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the most dangerous stalkers aren't the ones who yell or threaten. They're the ones who pay attention, the ones who study, the ones who wait. Source 3. The motel doorbell part. 1. The quiet shift. My name is Daniel. I'm 29 years old and I work the night shift at a small rural motel. It's not a chain, just a family-run place with 2 floors and maybe 25 rooms in total. I usually work from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The motel doesn't get much traffic at night, maybe 1 or 2 check-ins after midnight if someone is traveling. But for the most part, it's as quiet as a graveyard. That's why I took the job. I'm not much of a people person, so sitting in an empty building most nights works for me. The setup is like this. There's a main office with the front desk, a few chairs, a coffee machine, and a small brochure stand. Behind the counter is a hallway that leads to a back office. This back office is sort of a break room. It has another desk, a couch, a mini fridge, and a wall-mounted TV. The cool thing is that there's a little speaker there that beeps whenever someone rings the bell at the front desk. So I usually just sit in the back watching something on my laptop, maybe dozing on the couch, and when I hear the bell, I get up and go to the front. Part 2. His knowledge. I blinked and said, yeah, most of the time. He smiled. Then he said, I figured. I've passed by here a few times. I noticed it's always you. That made me more uncomfortable than I let on. Oh yeah, small town, I said. He didn't leave. Marina, right? I froze. I wasn't wearing a name tag. I was about to ask how he knew, but he kept saying I have nice handwriting. And he pointed to the whiteboard where I had written, Cinnamon coffee is back. Most people put dots on the I's. You use small dashes. It's very specific, thoughtful. I didn't answer. He didn't buy anything. He just stood there for another minute watching me as if he were studying my reactions. Then he finally nodded. I'm Paolo, he said. Just curious, that's all. And then he went out into the fog. Part 3. The pattern repeats itself. I jumped up and walked quickly to the main office, but once again it was empty. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end this time. I went to the doors and went out. The parking lot looked the same as before. The cars were all parked with their lights off and there was no movement anywhere. The road was completely empty too. I walked to the edge of the sidewalk and looked both ways, but there wasn't a single sign of life out there. I went back inside and sat behind the reception desk this time, instead of going to the back. I figured maybe some drunk person was playing a prank on me, like those doorbell ringing and running away pranks. Maybe a guest's child would find it funny. But after sitting there for 15 minutes without anything happening, I started to relax again. I leaned back in my chair, opened my laptop, and figured it was just one of those weird things I'd laugh about later. Then the doorbell rang again. I lifted my head so quickly it hurt. The lobby was still empty. No one in sight. My skin began to crawl. I stood up and walked around the reception area to make sure no one was hiding, but there was no one. I checked the lobby bathrooms. I even went outside again. Nothing. Part 4. The vigile walked around the parking lot a bit, illuminating it with my cell phone flashlight, but it was just deathly silent. I went back inside, and that's when I decided to try something different. Instead of going back to the break room, I sat in the chair right behind the reception desk. If someone was sneaking around and ringing the doorbell just to mess with me, I wanted to be there to catch them. I dimmed the lobby lights a little so the room was somewhat dark and just sat there listening. It was so quiet that every little sound made me shudder. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder than usual. The refrigerator in the back office turned on and hummed. Every 2 minutes, the building creaked as it settled. I sat with my arms crossed, staring at the doorbell on the counter. 15 minutes passed, then 20. My eyes started to feel heavy, and I thought maybe the person had given up. I even started to think I had imagined it all. Just when I was allowing myself to relax and nap, it happened. The doorbell rang, but this time I saw what was doing it.